Hey guys, as promised, I'm going to be doing a epoxy alcohol ink snow globe tutorial. So stay tuned if you're interested in learning that process. A couple of things that you're going to need for this tutorial is your epoxy, of course. I prefer the liquidy split from KS Resin. It's a fast setting epoxy. It's usually hard to touch within 2 hours of pouring. I've done classic epoxy. If you're new to epoxy, I would start with something that's not fast setting because you only get a 15-minute work time with fast setting epoxy. But I'm using KS Resin Liquidy Split. It's my favorite. As I've gotten more familiar with epoxy, I prefer the fast setting just because it, people always ask me how I get my cups to be like groove and bump free. And it's typically because of the epoxy that I use. A lot of times when you're using the classic epoxy, it does, like I said, take longer to set, but it also allows for the alcohol ink to kind of indent it and make a lot of bumps and waves. And when you do get those bumps and waves, what you can do is just sand. I do sand in between layers just to give it better bonding for that second layer of epoxy. But that's what I recommend. But we're going to start out today with a 16 ounce. This is my Wednesday snow globe. Everybody is loving it over on TikTok. So I figured I have two orders. I have a 16 and a 24 ounce. We're just going to do, actually we'll do 24 ounce just because it's what I'm used to. First thing you're going to want to do is you are going to want to sand this guy. So I just take my little sanding block. I get these at Home Depot. They're a fine to medium sander, nothing fancy. I'm just going to sand down this cup. It's going to scratch it up. It's going to look cloudy. Don't worry. You will get your shine back once you add your epoxy on top. I do not recommend sanding paper. Sanding paper is going to be a little more aggressive, and it's going to scratch up your cup pretty good. And sometimes with that sanding paper, you're not going to be able to cover up the scratches as well with the epoxy. So I prefer the sanding block just because it kind of buffers it more so than anything, and it gives it a smooth sanding instead of something so chaotic and crazy. So a couple PSAs: when you're working with epoxy, you definitely want to protect your lungs. So I do recommend to wear a N95, N99, a mask of some sort when you're doing epoxy, preferably a non-rebreather mask. That just means that the air being taken into the mask is filtered of toxins and things like that. These masks are made with special filters to prevent those toxic chemicals from getting to your lungs, and it filters 99% of the intake. You can wear a simple face mask if that's all you have, but I highly recommend something that's non-rebreathing. Do your research with epoxy. If you're working with it, look into PPE. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to wear it because you guys won't understand or hear me, but I'll show you what I do wear. And I do have adequate ventilation. So this is my mask that I typically do. These are my two filters that I use. These need to be changed out every so often. But for this video, we have a window open that's right next to my workspace. And I'm going to turn my fan on for good circulation. But make sure that you guys are wearing adequate PPE. Also gloves. Highly recommend some gloves. You don't want to touch this stuff. It's just yucky. It's a yucky feeling. So now that I've sanded my cup, my next step is going to be clean it off. You don't want all the sanding debris on here. It's not going to do well with your epoxy. So I'm just going to spray down this cup with some rubbing alcohol. Get it nice and saturated. Sorry, the garbage man is making his rounds. It's a little noisy. Just going to wipe this down, making sure that I get a nice dry surface. You can see it's pretty cloudy from my sanding. That's what we want. So I'm gonna just kind of pop this onto here. And we're gonna go ahead and get started with mixing up our epoxy. So, I'm gonna flip the camera to see if it does better. I'm still learning a lot about filming for YouTube. It's a little different than TikTok or Instagram, so we're gonna try something new for this one. I'm just gonna flip you guys on your side to see if we can get a widescreen going. Okay guys, so I am going to use my, actually I don't like this. Okay friends, so I'm gonna start pulling out some of my alcohol inks. Sorry if I'm not looking in the right place. It's a different setup, but we're gonna run with it. So I'm just pulling out a variety of purples that I like to use. I'm gonna use some of Mr. Fancy Pants. This is the Pearly Gates sauce. It gives a nice sparkle, and I'm also gonna use some mica powder on this one. I have my black, let me find it. People also asking me where I get my alcohol inks from. I prefer the Tim Holtz brand. There's a lot of nice colors, but also good quality alcohol inks as well. And I also love the ones off of Amazon. I have them linked in my storefront. Those are really nice as well. They're just the Amazon brand, but I've had some good luck with them. I don't know if I like that one. I'm trying to find my black. Where are you? Oh my gosh, it's right in front of my face. Black. So, I'm just going to do some different purples. I have a pearly purple. I have boysenberry, which is really pretty. And then this one is violet. This is that Amazon brand. Sorry, these are really gross. They get messy. I also have another color called Vineyard I'll probably end up using that's really pretty as well. But we're going to go ahead and get started mixing up our resin. So it's all, or epoxy, it's always two parts. So you have a resin and you have a hardener. I'm going to do, ooh, it's been a minute since I've done these. I'm going to do 20 and 20, I think is what I've been doing. So I'm going to fill up my little medicine cup here. You can get these on Amazon. They're in my storefront. Pretty much all the products, if I use it from Amazon, it's going to be in my storefront for you guys to check out and purchase. So I have 20 in here. I'm just going to dump this into my bigger cup for mixing. I don't like the measuring on these big cups. I'll probably find a different, they don't ever have the correct marks on here for me. The ones that I'm currently using. So once I have to repurchase, I'll probably try a different type of bigger cup. But for now, I'm just trying to use what I got. You definitely want to make sure that your ratios are on point with epoxy. Even just the slightest off-put can cause tackiness with your epoxy. So I think I did that one. Hang on. Yes, I did. Did I? Nope. That's this one. It's just stubborn. So you can get these bottles as well off of Amazon. These are great for dispensing epoxy without it being like super duper messy. They're like little sauce bottles. I believe they use them a lot in fast food restaurants. Sometimes they're hard to find. This could be your eyes peeled. I don't think I have those particular in my storefront, but you can check to see. All right. So I'm going to save this little medicine cup. I have my 2 parts here. And I'm just going to start mixing. It's kind of stinky at this point, but. And you just want to mix this for a good few minutes just to get it worked in really well. Just over here mixing, making sure it's going to be very bubbly too, especially your fast setting epoxies. They get really bubbly. That's normal. We're going to use our little heat gun when the time comes to help diminish those bubbles. I also use a torch from time to time if needed to help with that process as well. So I also have a piece of parchment paper down here below to help with any spillage or anything that may happen with the epoxy coming off the cup. This is a very messy process. Some people do this step first before they add the glitter into their tumblers. I personally like to add my glitter first so that I can kind of lay my inks down where I feel like I want them. I go a little lighter on my inks than some other creators. I did not coin this process. This is actually from GP Tumblers. Gavin, he's the one that kind of came up with this idea and started doing them first, and then we all just kind of jumped on board learning the process. He's been great about sharing how he does them on his lives and stuff, so shout out to Gavin, because I never would have thought of this until I saw him doing it. But it's super fun. I've done a couple of rainbow ones that have come out really cool. But I just love mixing the colors and matching the glitters, and super fun. Just note, if you're interested in one of these tumblers, these are listed out separate from my customs on my website because of the epoxy portion. It's a little more expensive to make these, so of course I have to increase the pricing on them. So these are under a separate listing on my website. They are under the alcohol ink snow globes. The vinyl on these does come sealed because I do add another layer of epoxy, a clear coat on top of this. So if you get a cup this style, the vinyl will be sealed. I do add that vinyl in between layers. You can also, on a custom, if you just want your vinyl sealed on a custom, you don't want the alcohol ink style, I do have that option now to seal vinyl with epoxy. I've tried some other sealants. I've tried Crystalac, the Bright Crystal. Is it Bright Crystal? I'm not sure what it's called now, but I did not like it. I know a lot of people use it. It's non-toxic. It's water-based, but you have to really layer it on to get a good coating. And it took me, on the last cup I did, it took me like 6 to 8 layers of it to fully seal a cup, and it was super streaky, so I just wasn't a fan. Maybe one day I'll try it again, but epoxy is just where it's at for me. I'm comfortable with this now. I got my technique down. Don't fix what ain't broke, you know what I mean? So I am just adding my base layer here, getting nice and even coated. I probably used about half of that epoxy. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so my measurements are probably off. I haven't done one of these styles in probably about a month. I think I was using 40, but just to be safe, I went with 50 because I don't want to have to mix up more later. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to go ahead and mix up my swirl so that that's done. I don't have to worry about doing that later when I'm messy. And while I'm mixing that up, that gives my epoxy a good chance to layer or even out and help some of those bubbles diminish as I'm mixing this up. So I'm just taking my white mica powder. I did about 2 heaping scoops of it, and I'm gonna do about 2 heaping scoops of the Mr. Fancy Pants secret sauce. And I'm going to mix that into this remaining epoxy. This is gonna be my swirl. It's probably too much for one swirl, but sometimes when I have extra epoxy, I just pour up some molds or something. Little letter keychains, different things. I don't like to waste it because it is so expensive. But here is my swirl sauce. It's got a white base to it. It's going to be pearlescent though because it has that mica powder in there. I need another glove. I wear gloves throughout this whole process just because you never know when you're gonna have to touch your epoxy, but also the alcohol inks can be messy too. So I just glove for the whole thing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with some black. I'm just gonna add a little bit of black to this cup. Once you swirl with your white, you'll start seeing more of these colors pop through, but in the beginning, you're probably not gonna see too much. It's okay if you cover up the logo. I'm gonna overlay my logo. So I try to hit a little bit of it so that you can get the alcohol ink in the background. So there's my black. Like I said, I don't go crazy with my inks. I don't want them to overpower the cup. I want to get a good bit of this glitter popping through. I'm going to take my boysenberry. This turner is also from Amazon. Nothing too fancy. I just got it to kind of start out trying to make these types of cups. I didn't want to spend a ton of money because I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it or not. And it's actually worked out well for me, so I haven't had the need to get a new one. But one day I will probably purchase something a little bit more sturdy. But this is a great starter for a tumbler turner if you're needing a turner. It has served me well. We'll go in with some lavender or violet. This one is violet. I love violet. It's a true purple. Oh no, it's almost gone. I'm gonna have to order more. This is one of my Amazon ones that I love. And then we're gonna go in with our pearl purple. This one's called Villainous. It's by Tim Holtz. You can pick up Tim Holtz inks at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Most local craft stores have them. You can also find them on Amazon as well. I think I have some linked in my storefront, like a starter pack for you guys if you wanted to start. And you can see this one has some shimmer to it. Super pretty. Just remember as you're dropping your inks that this is going to spread, so you don't want to go too heavy. It may not look like much now, but it will be once it starts kind of spreading out with the heat. So I'm done with my inks at this point. I'm going to go ahead and swirl on my white mixture. I just kind of hit heavy where my inks are because that's where I want the color to pop the most. But I give the cup a nice, good, even coating as well. Okay, this looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my heating gun and I'm just going to heat this up and let it start moving. Sorry guys, I got a phone call. So, so for this technique with the thicker resin, so with the fast setting epoxies, you're going to have to heat your snow globes a little bit more because they are going to, it's a thicker product, so it's going to take more heat. It also will not stay hot for long. So you're going to want to kind of keep your heat on until you get your swirl the way that you want it. If you're using a regular epoxy that doesn't take as long to set, then you won't need to do this for as long. It gets then pretty quick, so careful with the heat on regular epoxy. But if you're using a quick setting epoxy, you do have to be, especially the liquidy split, you do have to apply your heat for a little bit longer. So I'm going to continue on. I see some patches where it's bubbly and it needs to be spread out, and then we're going to reverse spin it as well. The closer you get to your epoxy, the better results you'll have with this thicker setting epoxy. So you can see how close I'm getting to that epoxy to swirl it out. And don't be afraid to hold your heat gun and go in a direction to kind of help encourage it to spread. Now, with your regular epoxy, like I've said, it doesn't take much for that to spread. It's going to spread fairly quick, so very cautious with the heat. You do not need to work with it as much as this quick setting. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer, because if you do this method like I'm doing it, for as long as I'm doing it on regular epoxy, it's going to be one big ink blob. So So I'm just kind of chasing my ink swirls with the heat gun as it spins. And then what I'm gonna do next is kind of hold it up, let it angle down, let the drips kind of come so they're not so horizontal. Kind of give it a little bit more movement in the swirl. So I'm just gonna take my turner and just hold it up. Once again, with regular epoxy, you do not have to hold it for as long. It's gonna start dripping fairly quick. Just for this quick setting, it takes a minute. She is thick. And then we're gonna go this way. This just helps your ink to start moving in this direction so that it's not so straight across in layers. Just gives it more movement, the appearance of it being a little more fluid. All right, and then what we will do, I just run my finger along the bottom and the top just to make sure there's no overage. If you have a ton of epoxy sitting on the bottom of your cup, it's gonna cause it to sit funky. So we don't want that. So I just got a little bit off there. I'm gonna continue on just a little bit with my heat gun. I'm gonna reverse the spin. This gives it some more movement as well. Once again, with this thicker, quick setting epoxy, just make sure you're constantly heating it as it moves. It's already starting to try and set on me, so with liquidy split, you get a 15-minute work time. I do feel like adding the heat gives you a little bit prolonged of a work time. It kind of extends it out a little bit, but not by much. As I'm applying the heat, I can see the ruffles that I'm making in the epoxy where it's trying to set. So it is trying to set on me here. So you just want to make sure that you're working quick enough to get it done in a reasonable amount of time. So we're going to be done with this one. It looks pretty good to me. I'll give you guys a closer look. This will turn for another 2 hours or so. I will kind of just touch it with a glove to make sure it's nice and set before I take it off the turner. And then I let it fully cure for about 24 hours. I'll sand it down, apply my vinyl, and then clear coat it again. I'll show you guys that process. I'll make another tutorial on that. But for right now, this is my base. From here, it will get vinyl and all the bling. Super duper cute.